So we are going to cover a couple different things today. We're going to cover the Park Service's transition to electronic submission. So that's why we're all here today. The Park Service is moving from paper-based submission processes to an all-digital one. We'll go over some of the MPS guidance and requirements. We'll talk about some of the PA Share submission process basics, the big one being, are you initiating a project or continuing a project with us? Steps for completing the wizard. So that's the online form that you'll complete with your information for your tax credit project. We are going to have some historic resource information. You're going to be asked to associate or identify the resource that is being rehabbed with the tax credit program as part of your submission. Also, using the project supplement wizard to continue project review. So what you need to know about the MPS timeline to electronic submission is August 15th is the most important date there. So tax credit applications can be submitted now electronically. All the information is published, the new forms are available and so forth that we'll talk about. So from now until midnight on or 11:59 p.m. on August 14th, you can submit your projects either electronically through PA Share or on paper. Starting August 15th and any time after that, everything must be submitted electronically. We will not accept any paper forms, and the Park Service will not accept any paper forms. So one question that I know the Park Service has gotten a lot in the training sessions that we've sat on, question about what happens when you have a project that's in progress with this transition. So even if your project was initiated through a hard copy mailed in submission, everything else is going to be electronic. So projects that started on paper will not continue on the paper. Okay, so if you sent in your part 2, you're in construction right now, you need to submit an amendment. If it's before August 15th, you can send us that amendment or you can do it through PA Share. But if you need to send us an amendment on August 15th or after that, it must be through PA Share. So a couple of points. You probably all have read these points. Actually, Sean, could I ask you to pop on and kind of go through these points for us? I see I have a couple of emails of people who are having a hard time getting into the webinar.
Sure, Selby. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Massey. I'm the Historic Tax Credit Reviewer for the PA SHPO. So discuss what is changing. The National Park Service is issuing new cover sheets, of course. They were issued on July 2023. They will replace the old 2019 forms. The reason for this is because they need a digital signature on the application cover sheets. Yeah, you'll submit the application packages to PA SHPO through PA Share, which is we've been doing that already. Some of the consultants do that now, and you submit all materials included in the application as PDFs. All communication from PA SHPO will be via PA Share. We've started that also, the process, so we're a little ahead of things with the Park Service. And all communication from MPS will be via email. No hard copy letters will be sent. And that has been started also by the National Park Service, kind of transition this digital submission.
Thank you, Sean. Hopefully we'll have a few more people who have been able to join us pop in. So as Sean said, this is what is changing. All of these things should not be new if you've been able to follow through some of the email communications that we've been sending out over the summer. So we're going to touch on each of these points as we go through the webinar. So what is not changing is anything about the program requirements or the administration. So the amount of the credit It's not changing eligibility for the credit, the three-part application, taking the credit, the information that's required on the forms. As Sean mentioned, it's the electronic signature that was driving the form change. So the information that's required and collected is not changing. The documentation standards are not changing. The review times are not changing. The sequence of review, any of the technical assistance, et cetera, and the application fees that are set by the National Park Service are also going to remain the same. So we are now getting into the what you need to know section of this webinar. So this is touching on those Park Service requirements that we were mentioning before. So I'll go through each of these points again. Please enter questions in the chat. For those of you who are just joining us, we are taking questions in the chat, and at question breaks, we will read and answer those for you. First one, there are new forms. These forms are dated July 2023. You'll see that in the upper left-hand corner of the form. Please download your new forms. Digital signatures. The graphic here is from the Park Service of what they will accept. So you can use a digital Adobe signature, or you can write out your signature and scan it and pop it in there as like a JPEG, or create a PDF of your signature and drop that in as well. You can in Adobe change the font of the type. That will not be accepted as your signature. So it has to be one of the examples shown here on the screen. All right, file requirements. So all of your files must be transmitted to us as PDFs. There's one exception to this, which is the transmittal log, which I'll come back to and I'll explain in a little bit. Everything must be as PDFs. They must also be named a certain way, and this is really, really important. There is guidance on the National Park Service website. I think Megan has a link for that she can drop into the chat, I believe. If not, it's on some of our later slides. But the Park Service is requiring that files be named in a certain way. That is going to be the NPS number, the application part, the property name, the city or the state. If you don't have a property name, you'll submit your property address. If you're just initiating your project with your part 1, or in some cases a part 2, you'll just start with the application part because you won't yet have that NPS number. There should be no spaces, punctuation, or special character in the folder or file names, and they should be less than 75 characters. So abbreviate if you need to in the property name or the property address, or certainly the city. File size, when you're creating your files, they need to be 70 megabytes or less. This is the PA share requirement, that we cannot accept files that are larger than that 70 megabytes. So there's a big table right in the middle of the screen. I don't expect you to memorize it, and I'm not going to read everything listed here. What I wanted to do is illustrate that you are going to save all of your application parts in separate individual files. This is something that I mentioned in the beginning. We'll be sending out a PDF of this webinar, of these slides, and this is something you can go back and refer to. So I want to emphasize again that everything should be as its own separate file. This makes for much, much easier reviewing by SHPO staff and by National Park Service staff. And also keeps those file sizes down and keeps those naming conventions a little bit simpler. In these lists, when you go back to refer to those, you'll see that there's a couple of asterisks for if a file type is applicable in that situation. And for drawings in particular, when you're saving your drawings as a PDF, make sure that they are flattened. So all the separate layers and so forth are flattened, so the files are not too big or too large for reviewers to open. So transmittal log. So this is something new that the Park Service is requiring for SHPOs to upload with the files that we transfer to the National Park Service. So this is the only file that can be attached as a Word document. So when you're uploading things to PA Share, we'll talk about attachments later in the webinar. Everything is a PDF except for the transmittal that can be in Word, because we will take that and use that and update it as needed or change it as needed when we upload all of your project files to the National Park Service. So you can, again, use this as reference. The most important thing, I think here, it's pretty self-explanatory what we want that transmittal log to look like. You're going to tell us what the project is. You're going to tell us what the file is and what that file attachment name is. Only one project per transmittal log. That shouldn't be an issue, because you should be only submitting one project through PA Share through that wizard at a time. So make sure that in your transmittal log that you are only listing those files related to that particular project. NPS does have a template that you can find in all of their guidance on their website as well. So you can look at that for more information. This is just an example to give you an idea of what that transmittal log should include. So photos, this is going to be one of the biggest changes, is that you no longer have to print. Some of you who still were printing files or photos, excuse me, you don't have to print those individual 4x6 photos any longer and label them on the back. So the photo requirements, you're going to submit your photos as one PDF file. Now, the asterisk to that is, consider breaking it into 2 or more files if you have a very large property. If you have a massive building, a massive complex, it would make sense to separate them as exterior photos and interior photos. Again, we have that 70 megabyte requirement for size. Or considering if you have a site that has multiple buildings within it that are going to be addressed in the tax credit project, then consider separating your photo PDF files by buildings. You will indicate how you divided the photos up in your naming convention. So when you say photo sheet, you might say photo sheet interior or photo sheet building A. Please do not submit individual JPEGs. It will take you a very long time to submit individual JPEGs in PA Share, and we would then have to download all of them and repackage them. So please do not submit individual JPEGs. Submit PDF photo sheets. There is a National Park Service template on their website. Again, the guidance for those is no more than 2 photos per page. If you're doing, if your photos are a landscape, kind of that vertical orientation, you can put 2 on a page. If they're portrait or horizontal orientation, it's better to keep them as 1 photo per page. The less manipulation reviewers have to do in terms of, rotating the PDF file or the image to better see a portrait orientation, the better. The less that we have to manipulate, the better. So the minimum photo size in those photo pages is still 4x6. In your document header, include the property name, address, the date of the photos, and what application part they relate to. So part 1, part 2, amendment, part 3. And then below each photo, you're going to want to put the photo number and caption. So again, the Park Service has templates and examples for the photos that you can find on their website. Your photos will be separate than your photo key. So ideally, the reviewer is going to have your photo key up on one screen and then looking at the photos on the other. So the quick review of these requirements, the Park Service requirements, before we get into some PA Share specifics. So all applicants are expected to follow the National Park Service's instructions, and we will return incorrectly named or formatted files. So what this means, if you're familiar with submitting things in PA Share, everything that comes in goes to a group of staff that we call our triage. they take a look at that initial submission, and before they create a project and send it on to a reviewer, there's a couple of different things that they look for. So if your files or your application is not correctly named or formatted, we will return that at that stage. Triage staff will return it as an insufficient submission. So that will happen if you are using the old forms, if you're using the ones that are dated 2019, not the 2023 ones, if you're not using the correct naming conventions. If you handled the historic resource incorrectly, which I will get to in a little bit, but wanted to mention here. If you did not submit all of your docs except for the transmittal as a PDF, or if you don't have the minimum number of files for each application part. So with a part 1, we're going to expect a cover sheet, a narrative, photos, and a photo key. So they're going to look to make sure that all of those minimum number of files are there. If they don't see those, they may not reject your submission. They will return it as insufficient, and you'll be asked to correct those things before you resubmit it. Sometimes the reviewers, sometimes Sean or I will catch things once they've been created as a project, and then we'll do a more information request. So on the website or on the screen here, Megan will drop these in the chat as well. We do have a dedicated electronic submission information page on the PHMC website. You can find all of this information as well as links to the Park Service website. There is the URL for the National Park Service's guidance for electronic submission. It's all on one page on their website as well. And if you are in doubt about any of these things, recognizing this is a transition for all of us, we have a resource account for historic tax credit, the historic tax credit program. Right here, you can email that, and there's several of us who monitor that and can respond to any of your questions. So please, when in doubt, get in touch with us and we'll answer your question. So we are getting close, a couple more slides to our first question break. So reminder, if you have a question about anything, please drop it in the chat. So in continuing or what you need to know, PA SHPO submission process. So how are you going to submit everything to us for us to transfer it to the National Park Service? So we're going to use PA Share for all of our federal historic tax credit project reviews. You will need to have a basic PA Share account to submit projects. So I'll get to that in a moment. What or how you'll submit through PA Share depends on whether you're initiating or continuing a project. So we'll talk about that as well. One thing I do want to note and emphasize is that the tax credit submission process, so the steps that you'll see in the wizard, what we're asking you to do to identify the historic resource that the project's going to be rehabbing uses many of the same processes that you're already used to in PA Share. So if you use PA Share for environmental review projects or determination of eligibility project and so forth, this is going to look very similar. We've tried to keep things as consistent as possible across the submissions so that you're not having to learn new modules or collect information in a different way for different programs. So where to look for help, I'll mention this now. Megan will drop these in the chat, and these are all on our website. We have a step-by-step tutorial that's essentially, you'll see a lot of the same graphics in this webinar today. We also have a short, handy checklist that you can use to help you get used to this new way of doing things. We have lots of other tutorials on PHMC's website. There is a dedicated PA Share help desk. They are fantastic and will help you with any questions you have about PA Share. If you have program questions about the tax credit program, again, here's that resource account. So a few things to touch on before you begin your submission in PA Share. So one, you want to make sure that you already have a PA Share account if you do not already have one. You'll want to understand or figure out if you're initiating a new project review with us for your tax credit project or if you're going to continue an existing project. You should know your property's historic status. I'm going to emphasize this point a couple of times, but determination of eligibility requests should be submitted before you submit your tax credit application. So we need to have those determination of eligibility reviews completed before we can complete our Part 1 reviews. Before you even begin to think about PA Share, you should complete and assemble all of your application forms and materials just like you would if you were going to mail them, except you're obviously not going to print them out, but you're going to have them all completed and assembled and named, etc. I would recommend having one good overall photo of the property and some basic information about the historic property at hand. And just a final note that your PA Share submission should actually be the last step in the submission process. You're going to want to take care of all of those things in terms of getting your application together before you begin your PA Share submission. So this before you begin is also covered in the checklist that I mentioned that we have for you that you can go through and situate yourself to submit your project. So a quick note about accessing PA Share. We have a lot to cover in this webinar, so I did not spend a lot of time here. As I noted, you will need to have a PA Share account that uses Keystone Login. You may already have a Keystone Login if you've renewed your driver's license or car registration online with PennDOT, or if you've worked with some other state agency. If you have an account, you're going to click this sign in button right here. If you do not have an account, you're going to register for an account. That will take you through the Keystone login process right there in the PA Share screen so that you're not having to go to one website, fill in all of the information and so forth. Please follow directions on the screens. Login problems and sign-in problems are some of the most frequently asked questions at the help desk. Down here at the bottom is the address where you'll find PA Share if you're not familiar with it or have not been in the system before. Once you register and sign into PA Share for the very first time, you will have a free basic account. You only need to have a basic account to submit your tax credit project. If you do choose to purchase a pro or business account, that will give you access to more resource information and some additional features. So I highly recommend checking that out if you're going to be a frequent user of PA Share. Before I get into the PA Share screens, we're going to break for questions in a moment. A few notes about working in PA Share. It'll time out after 30 minutes of inactivity. So that's one of the reasons why I said make sure you have all of your ducks in a row with your files, etc., before you begin your submission. There is on-screen help. All required information is indicated with red asterisks. You can save as you go, but you cannot submit until you've completed all those required sections. The fields that you'll see in PA Share and their order generally matches the Park Service forms. So you'll see how they line up as we get into some of those examples. You can find the tutorial for the tax credit and for other ways that you may need to use PA Share to submit a tax credit application, such as searching for a project or a resource, or submitting that DOE request to us before you get started on your tax credit project. You can find all of those on the help materials page of the PHMC website. And again, there is that help desk link. Do we have any questions, Sean?
I do not see any, Shelby, in my chat, so.
All right, so just a reminder, if you have questions, drop them in the chat for us. We will have another question break as we go through. I'm going to take that as you all are super comfortable with all of this information and you've heard it before and know exactly what to do here. All right, so we'll move on. So as I mentioned, how you submit your project in PA Share is going to depend on whether or not you are initiating your project or continuing your project. So if you or someone else from your project team submitted any part of the tax credit application, either hard copy or digitally, that means you will not, if they, let me back up. If you have not submitted anything and your project team has not submitted anything, so this is the very first time that the PA SHPO is going to see this project. No, nothing has been submitted. There is not going to be a project in PA Share. That means you will initiate your project review. To do that, you will use your federal tax credit wizard. You will use that wizard to initiate your project review with your part 1 or your part 2 or both, depending on the nature of your project. If you or someone else has submitted something previously for this project, either hard copy or electronically, then there is probably already a project in PA Share. The way that this works now is that PA SHPO staff transfer projects that come in on paper into a PA Share project. So your tax credit project, you may have corresponded with Sean through PA Share, or may have checked PA Share for your review letters or Park Service correspondence, or to submit additional information electronically. So there's chances are, if you've submitted something before, there's already a project in PA Share. In this case, you will continue your project review. To continue project review, you will use the project supplement wizard, and we'll go through that in more detail towards the end of the webinar. So the next portion that we're going to talk about focuses on that federal tax credit wizard, which you're going to use, again, if you need to initiate a project, because we've not yet looked at any applications or any information about this particular project. Now, in some cases, I will mention, sometimes you're doing a rehab of a rehab. So perhaps a property was rehabbed in the 80s with the historic tax credits. If you are doing a rehab of a rehab, that is a new project in PA Share. So you may see a project's already in there with a number, say 1983 PR 12345. That would be an old closed project. So you are going to initiate a new project with a tax credit project that you're submitting for now, even if it was a previous rehab. So when you are initiating your project, you're going to do that through the submission of a part 1 or a part 2, depending on the property's National Register status. This is exactly the way that it is now. So if you have, used to submitting your projects on paper and you need a part 1, then you will initiate your project with a part 1 here. If you have, if your property is a single building that is already individually listed in the National Register, then you can go right to the part 2. So this is not a change to the program requirements. It's simply for the purposes of explaining how you're going to fill out your wizard. So part 1, if it's in a contributing building in a listed or certified local historic district, if it's in an eligible historic district that you're going to list as part of the rehab project, if you're requesting that preliminary determination of individual listing, if the property is listed but there's more than one building, so those large campuses that have multiple buildings on them. Again, I'm going to reiterate, we strongly recommend that you submit your determination of eligibility separately in PA Share before you start your tax credit process, your submission process. So you'll find this wizard, the federal tax credit wizard, on the same submit page that you find all of the other PA Share wizards. You're going to go here. You can find it here at the submit or through this icon. Once you get to the submit page, you can find the card that says federal tax credit, or it'll be listed on the left side of your screen. You will start just like any other PA Share project submission with your contact information. So you're going to take the project contact from section 3 of your part 1 or part 2 cover sheet and enter that as the primary contact. Once you've done that, you can add additional contacts. So for example, the project applicant from section 4 of that part 1 or part 2 cover sheet, you will add as additional contacts. So all contacts will receive emails from PA Share about your project. The next section, the project overview. The project name that is up here should be the same as the historic property name in section 1 of your application cover sheets. And then entering the project description. It is super helpful to us if you can provide a very brief 1 to 2 sentence summary of the historic tax credit project that you're submitting so that we can at a glance know what project we're dealing with and what we should expect. So you'll enter that here in that project overview section. So in the project overview section, this is where you'll tell us if you're initiating your project with a part 1, a part 2, or with both. So if you are doing, if you're just initiating with a part 1, you're going to click the part 1 circle, and then you're going to select from that list. You'll hover over and you'll get a drop-down list. It's the same list that is on your part 1 form. So you'll choose the option that you indicated on your form. If you're starting with a part 2 because your property is a single building already individually listed, the 16 fields will open. These are the same as section 2 of the part 2 cover sheet. So we're going to ask you to enter all of that information from your part 2 cover sheet. If you choose to do both, you will get that part 1 nature of request and all of the 16 part 2 fields. So again, this is the same information that you've already thought about and collected in section 2 of your part 1 and part 2 cover sheets. So next we're going to get to the project location. So this is where we are going to collect information about the property location to identify the property being rehabbed. We are not storing spatial data here. So that means that you are not able to search for tax credit projects spatially. We are only using this to identify historic resources within your project area. So this allows us to what we call associate the historic resource to the project. So you will start by entering the full address from section 1 of your cover sheets. And then you're going to zoom the map to the project address. And this is what it will look like on your screen. You can zoom in and out. There are 2 buttons on the left side, a plus and a minus, to zoom your map in or move it. The very upper icon in the upper right-hand corner are base maps. If you work better seeing kind of that aerial photo view, then you can change that here. If you're looking at the map and thinking, wow, there's a lot going on here, I need to turn off some of these layers so I can see more clearly, you can do this with this layers icon. It looks like several pieces of paper stacked on top of each other. And then if you're not familiar with what the different color coding and symbols are, there's a map key that you can click and open. Your property address that you zoomed to, that you entered from your forms, is going to show up as a blue X. And that's the yellow arrow here. To begin drawing your boundary, in the bottom right corner, there's a little pencil. You will click that pencil icon to begin drawing. So what that looks like is this. So if you look in the bottom left corner, you're going to click that pencil icon. It's going to open this whole toolbar. Click the polygon one. It's the one that is marked with that orange arrow, and you're going to start to draw your project boundary. Again, we're not collecting spatial data, so this does not need to be exact, but it should be as close as possible, particularly if you have large properties, because what's happening is that it's showing you on the map the resources that we have already documented in PA Share. Sometimes those resource boundaries need a little work and need to be cleaned up a little bit. So be as accurate as possible with yours, but don't worry if it's not exactly perfect onto those tax parcel lines. So you're going to draw your boundary around your resource. And when it's finished, you'll double click to close your polygon. It's going to be outlined in this black with this black fill. And you should see it'll list the municipalities containing your resource down here at the bottom. So once you finish drawing, that's what it's going to look like. So project location, as I mentioned, we're not saving spatial data about your project location. We are using it to identify historic resources in the project area. This is so that it's an easy way for you to associate the historic resource with the project. So below the map, I will show you in a moment, it's going to return a couple of grids, resources in the project area. That's those whose boundaries intersect with the project location. At this point, you are going to either update an existing resource record, or if there is no resource record already in the system, you will create a new one. You will add a new one. One thing, I'll repeat that on this, I'll note it on this slide, and then I'll repeat it a couple of times. Sometimes you will see a historic district is returned in that grid. The historic district is not the historic resource. So do not select the district your resource is in when you're associating resource. That is something that PA SHPO staff will handle on our end internally. So you're updating an existing resource. You are updating a resource, even if the building is already individually listed in the National Register, you are just updating the resource record to its current appearance. You are not changing anything about the nomination or the qualities for the building that is already listed. You're just simply recording what it looks like now. You will do this if you have already requested that determination of eligibility. You will have had to upload a photograph and drawn the boundary and filled out all those minimum record fields for that. So you will just simply scroll through this screen, make sure everything is correct, and close it. You'll see a record has been returned, even if it's been unevaluated or even in some cases not eligible. Again, you'd want to take care of resolving any of those eligibility questions before you start this process. You may see in some cases, we do have buildings that have their own resource record, even if they're in a listed or local certified historic district. Those situations are probably not super common, but they may exist. So what you'll see at the bottom of the screen is a screenshot. In the project boundary that I drew, I returned two resources. One is the individual building, the above ground resource type. That is the one I want to choose. I do not want to choose the Sellersville Historic District that includes that individual building. That is not what you want to pick. This is one of the reasons why our triage staff would return your project to you and ask you to fix that. So if you draw your boundary and your resources within the project area, if it comes back that you don't see your project here, you don't see your property, you don't see an individual record, all you might see is the district. In that case, you will need to add a above ground resource. So this applies if the property, if you need to do a part one because you have a contributing building to a district, you don't see that that contributing building already has a resource record, you're going to add one. If you don't see one, we also may have just never recorded that building individually if it's not in the district. Again, if you've resolved your eligibility questions as it relates to National Register listing for your property, you will see the resource returned and you will just need to update that. So this is one of those situations that I noted. We kept the process the same for different program areas in PA Share. When you go to add your resource or update your resource, you will get a new window that will open. your building resource details. This is the same window that's used in all other PA Share wizards for entering building information. So you're going to complete or update the required fields. I would recommend at the end, you go through and you save and continue, click the save and continue button, and then click validate. That's the fastest way to figure out if you missed anything that would keep you from saving and closing the building resource details window so that you can proceed. Once you've finished updating your resource, you're going to see it in two grids. It's now going to show up in the grid below, newly identified resources and previously identified resources with updated information. Yes, it's a mouthful. So you will see it in the top grid and you will see it in the bottom. It will show as unprocessed. We will take care of processing it. That doesn't mean anything that you will have to be worried about. You add a resource, same thing. It will show up here in this second grid for newly identified resources. At this point, you're done working with your historic resource and you will upload all of your documents for us to do our review. So this again is like other places in PA Share where you upload information. You're going to upload all your PDFs of your applications here in the add an attachment grid. Again, follow the National Park Service requirements that we went over at the beginning of the webinar. And as a reminder, we will return applications or pause our review for incorrectly submitted files. In the photos section, this is not required. It is optional if you want to upload a photo of the property being rehabilitated. You can do so here. It does not replace, should not replace those individual PDF photo sheets that are required for the Part 1 and Part 2 applications. So this is simply something where you can upload a photo and it serves as a quick reference for us or from someone else who's working in the project screens in PA Share to see what the property looks like. Oh, sorry about that. When you go, one detail about uploading your attachments, when you click that add an attachment button that I showed you in the previous slide, you're going to see this attachment detail screen open. You're going to select your file from local disk. I strongly recommend making sure that they're all saved somewhere where it's easy for you to upload into PA Share. Sometimes if you're working from a SharePoint site, that's not super easy to do unless you've linked it through OneDrive or even File Explorer. Sometimes it's easiest as well to have a copy on your desktop that you upload from your desktop. The name/title, enter the file name, which is again that NPS required naming convention. You will be asked to select an attachment type. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the list is alphabetical, you'll see tax credit part 1 or tax credit part 2. You will select that attachment type for all the tax credit materials you're submitting. So if you're initiating your project review with a part 1 and you have, say, 6 files related to that part 1, all of them are going to be attachment type tax credit part 1. When you're ready to submit your project, again, this is like all of the other applications in PA Share. You're going to click the Submit to SHPO button. If you have any problems, you're going to get this angry looking red box here that's going to tell you what's missing. If you scroll up through your screens, you'll see that anything that is missing is going to be outlined in red. Once you click that Submit to SHPO button and it goes forward, you will see on your screen a little message that says thank you for your submission with a token number. Take note of this token number. If we have any problems, we don't receive your application, you have problems with your submission, this token number is what we look for before it's turned into a project. Once PA SHPO triage staff creates a project from your submission, you will get an email. Hold on to this email. It's going to give you that submission number, but it's also importantly going to give you your project number and your project name and links where you can go back and find your submission. So you will get, again, you'll get this email once a project is created. So pretty often, very quickly, after you've submitted. Things don't usually sit in the triage inbox for very long at all. So we are at questions again. Any questions in the chat, John?
No, I see no questions.
Okay, well then we will just keep on going. We'll take questions again at the end if anything comes to mind. So looking back at this very simple flow chart again about, are you initiating a project in PA Share or continuing one? So if a project is already exists in PA Share, so there's already been some material submitted to us for review for the current project, you are continuing your project review. So that means you will use the project supplement wizard. You will not go back and use the federal tax credit wizard. You will use the supplement wizard, and that's how you're going to send us all the information that we need to receive once you've initiated your project. So project supplement wizard if you're continuing a project. Quick screenshot of that submit screen. So here, project supplement, you're going to find that in the bottom right corner of that submit screen. You'll probably have to scroll down to find it. You'll also find it in the list on the left-hand side of the screen. So to submit something using the project supplement wizard, you will need to have at hand your PA Share project number. If you've forgotten your project number, you can look back to the email that I showed you a few slides ago that you'll get once your project is created. Excuse me, you can also search PA Share for projects and find your project number that way. This is as the PA Share project number, this is going to be the number that has the year, PR, and then a series of 5 numbers after that. It is not the same as the National Park Service number. Their number is only 5 characters, where ours is 5, 6, 7, 11 or 12 characters. Once you have your PA Share project number at hand, you will, see if I can highlight this here, search existing projects. You're going to type the project number in here and click search. You will need to be a project contact on that project to find your project to submit additional information. So I'm going to go through the project contact slides in a moment, but again, you will get this red box here saying, nope, sorry, no project, if you are not listed as a project contact. So assuming that you are, you have your project number, you're listed as a contact, you will get this blue box that says, great, we found your project. Please go ahead and submit your additional information. The project supplement screen is very, very straightforward and simple. You're going to provide us with a brief description. So again, this is something that we are going to use to look to see that it relates to the same project. So if you are submitting application materials for the correct project. So if you're telling us that you're submitting it here for the Washington House, that all your attachments should be named with Washington House in the title, for example. So we use this description to verify that additional information is being added to the correct project. Just like with the attachment and photos in the tax credit wizard and the project supplement wizard, you're going to click add an attachment and go through the same steps. So you'll upload those PDFs, make sure you're following the MPS requirements for file naming and for file organization. And again, we will return applications or pause review if they are not submitted correctly. Project photos, only if you really, really want to or feel that it's really important. You can provide a photo as a JPEG, only if necessary. And again, it does not replace any of those photo sheets. So don't submit your, say, for example, you're submitting an amendment of a masonry cleaning. We don't want to see photos of that masonry cleaning here in project photos. We want to see them as a PDF attachment that has been uploaded under the add an attachment grid. Same steps. you'll submit to SHPO. If you have any problems, you shouldn't. On this screen, there's just 3 things that you need to do once you've found your project. Correct what's missing, and then do the submit to SHPO. So as I mentioned, to use a project supplement, you do need to add a project you need to be a project contact. So on that submit page again, scroll down to the bottom, the right corner of all that screen with all those rectangles on it, you'll find the project contact wizard there. It's also at the very bottom of the list on the left side of your screen. So only project contacts can add project contacts. So if you are working in a firm or in a project team and you are listed as a contact and you want, for example, somebody else in your firm, one of your colleagues, to be able to submit materials for this project while you're on vacation, say, you will need to go in and add that person as a project contact before they can submit supplemental information to continue consultation on their project. So only project contacts can add project contacts. Similarly, to search for projects, you'll need to have that PA Share project number at hand for you to find the project to add the contacts to. To add a new contact, it's the same steps as it is in the wizard to add the required information, name, email address, so forth. And then you'll click submit to SHPO and it's automatically taken care of. This is one of the improvements that we've made over the last couple of years to PA Share since it launched back in 2020, I think. Before you used to have to email our help desk, now you can do that all on your own. So those are the PA Share screens that you'll have to work with. I know it was a tremendous amount of information. We covered a lot in terms of requirements as well as what PA Share screens are going to look like and what you'll need to provide through those screens. So again, we have lots of help materials available, the Park Service guidance. These will all be links in the PDF copy of this webinar that we send you afterwards with the recording link. But here are all the Park Service documents that give you the guidance for what they are requiring, step-by-step tutorials for the tax credit process, and things like submitting a determination of eligibility request. These step-by-step tutorials are available on the PHMC website. For PA Share help, again, we have a fantastic help desk. You can reach them at pashare@pa.gov. And if you need assistance with the tax credit program, if you have questions for us, questions about these requirements, so forth, then you can please contact SHPO tax credit staff at phmctaxcredit@pa.gov. And I don't think we've had any other questions come into the chat at this point. Anybody have any? Okay, so thank you for joining us today. I hope your eyes aren't too glazed over with all this new information. But again, we'll be doing this on August 2nd. If you have colleagues who weren't able to join us today, but you think this would be helpful for them, they can please join us at that time as well. And our contact information is up here on the screen, along with the PHMC or PA Share landing page and our PHMC website. So I will leave this up for a few minutes. That is everything that we have for you today. So thanks for joining us, and please reach out for questions. Have a great day.